I figured we'd just start with you telling us about how you grew up, where you were born.
Okay. Probably important to understand the timing, the where, and how. I was born during the Great Depression. And I was born in Chicago, but we only lived there for 3 months, and then my family moved to Georgia. During the Depression, Dad had a college education, went to Xavier University in Cincinnati on scholarships, football, baseball scholarship.
That's amazing. He must have been a great
He
athlete.
was good.
Yeah.
He was left-handed, but he loved baseball. He was very good at football. So, but he had a college education, graduated from Xavier, but couldn't get a job. He worked in a gas station in Chicago.
Imagine that, even with a college degree.
Even with a college degree. But then he got a job. His mother helped him get the job through some friend of hers. And it was as a traveling salesman selling hardware. The Schlegel Lock Company. You're familiar with Schlegel?
Still around?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're still, that's one of the best made locks. Anyway, Dad sold, traveled around the South. He had that district, that area, and sold the locks until the war years came along. And then there was no building going on. So there was no sales, no locks and things like that. And then Dad kind of went into the construction business. But let's see now. So
when was Don born?
Don was born in 1934. He was 4 years older than I am. I was born in 38. And Don was born in 34. He was kind of a miracle child. Not a
Miracle child.
Mom thought it was a miracle, but however it happened, we don't know.
Timing issue there?
Yeah, we don't know exactly how it happened, but in Mom's diary, which I don't know if you all have a copy of the diary, but I think it's in the computer.
I've got it in the archives.
You've
Yeah.
got it in the
Yeah.
archives.
I'm sure.
And it was funny because she started writing it when she was dating Dad, and then all of a sudden it stops. And that is when she found out that she was pregnant with Don. We assumed, that was it. So the background, I think most of you know a lot. On Mom's side of the family, her dad, Pop Wright, was 100% Irish, and his mother's family was Ambrose, which was an Irish, English-Irish family. And he was born in Iowa, but then they moved to Springfield and they grew up there. Then Grandma Wright, on that side of the family, she was 100% German. So the German...
German, right? She was born in...
No, that's on Dad's side of the family. On Mom's side, their name was Hohl, H-O-H-L-O. Probably shortened from Hohenzollern or something like that, So they were German, Irish on that side. And then on Dad's side, it was the same thing. His dad, the Kelley family, were 100% Irish. And then he married Grandma Kelley, who was born in Germany. It was Prussia at that time. So
she spoke German to them, and he even learned German from her.
he did, and Grandma Dahlke, that was their name, the German family. Grandma Dahlke came to live, and that was common at that time. There were no Beatitudes in those days.
Yeah.
You kids are lucky. I mean, it's farm the old people out, but no, but the elderly family members always went to live with the kids. And Grandma and Grandpa took care of Grandma Dalkey, who spoke only German. So Dad learned German from her, and they spoke German in the household, which we could never figure out when Dad went into the military, into the service during the Second World War, why they didn't send him to Germany, you know, because he spoke German. But no, they sent him to Japan.
And he went into the Marine Corps. He volunteered for the Marine Corps.
How old was he when he did that?
He was in his 30s. He was just about over the age
The limit,
You know,
yeah.
I think he was 32, 33 maybe. And that was a surprise because he didn't consult Mom.
Imagine her
She
reaction.
was really pissed
Yeah.
off.
Yeah.
Because she thought he could avoid going into the service altogether.
Yeah.
Because he was working in a government program for a construction company at that time. And they were building some kind of thing for the Navy. But, so he could have gotten out for that, but it was a, you know, a war of honor. I mean, if you didn't fight in the Second World War, that was something else. So,
And he was in for how many years? And where did he serve?
Dad he went in 41 and got out in 44. He was in for 3 years. And,
So you were 3 when he went in?
yeah, I guess.
Don was 7?
Yeah.
And what's the memory that you have of him talking to Don when he left?
I don't have any memory at all of it.
But what was Don's story about that?
Don had very, very strong memories of that, and they were painful. Because, you know how sensitive Don was. My brother's very sensitive.
Yeah.
And so Dad gave him a little talk before he went into the service, and saying that Don now was the man of the household and had to take care of his mother and his
younger brother.
his delinquent little brother.
3-year-old.
The 3-year-old.
He's the man of the house.
Yeah, Don's the man of the house. But he had this great, he thought it was a great responsibility, and it really was.
Right.
You know, so those, I don't remember Dad at all, you know, before the war.
Before he returned then, really.
Yeah, until he did return, and then you know, I had.
Do you remember that? Do you remember the return? Were you old enough that was a strong memory?
I can remember going down with Mom in our old Chevrolet. It was a 1942 Chevy. And I remember going to the train station in Atlanta and picking Dad up when he had just come home the way. He went first to San Diego and then took the train back into Atlanta.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Dad never recovered from the war. He was an alcoholic, of course, and, you know, for the rest of his life. But he was wounded in the Battle of Peleliu, which I've written about, and then he got malaria when he was over there too. So all of those things. But his war experience was, you know, was
Difficult.
traumatic.
Yeah.
Traumatic to say the least. Yeah.
And he had the Purple Heart.
Yeah, from his wounds in. They were shrapnel wounds, I guess, which was even more. Was very common to get. Shrapnel was, you know, when a shell would burst, the pieces of it would come off. Anyway, that's what Dad's done.
So he came back and went to work for Schlegg again, and they lived in a little house on in Decatur.
They moved to the house in Decatur, which is the only. Well, I remember when we moved to Atlanta, they rented an apartment on 4th Street.
Yeah,
I
we
think
went
we've
by
all
there.
been
Yeah,
there.
we went by there.
Because the apartment was still there when the last time we were in Atlanta. And it was a little 2-story apartment building, and that's where we got Lily Mae, the maid that came in, and she was just a 15-year-old kid. at the time.
She knew how to cook better than your mom?
Oh, yeah, she did. And she was good at housekeeping, which mom never was. Mom was not a domestic.
She was social.
Oh, yeah, very.
She knew how to play cards, right? And she knew how to dance, I'm sure.
That she did. But, so yeah, Lily Mae came to work with us there, and Mom went to work for the Office of Price Administration, OPA, which was a government kind of funded thing.
During the war? Or
Well, she worked there during the war, yeah, but she started that job even before because Mom and Dad wanted to buy a house. And since Dad was in construction, he knew some people in construction, and they found that little house out in Decatur, which you remember, because we lived there.
Was that after the war then, or was that before?
No, this was before the war.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, when we moved there, I guess I was.
Do you remember the address? Was it
424
424
Hilldale
Hilldale
Drive.
Drive?
There you go.
Yeah, so you remember it then.
Decatur, Georgia. Yep.
Yeah. That was in Decatur, Georgia. Now that was, Decatur at that time. Of course, we were Catholic, and this really had a big influence on me because being Catholic at that time, it was, less than 2% of the population was Catholic. Everybody else was Baptist.
Oh,
In
Atlanta or
Decatur.
Georgia?
Yeah, in Georgia. So growing up as a Catholic in the South at that time was, the Ku Klux Klan was going. I can remember Klan meetings.
Really?
At Stone Mountain, yeah, and Stone Mountain was just outside of Decatur, and they used to have the meetings of the Klan there, and we never went to the meetings. Dad could have joined. I mean, he had the sheets and everything. No.
No.
No. So yeah, but then when Dad came back from the service, in the meantime, I went into first grade and second grade at Winona Park. I think I've shown you that school too.
Mm-hmm.
It was the public school there, and there was no kindergarten in Decatur. We were lucky to have a first and second grade, I guess. But when Dad came home, then he insisted that we go to a Catholic school. The only Catholic school was elementary school was Sacred Heart in Atlanta, and so we would go in with him. He would drive us down to school. Don was at Sacred Heart for a while there too, and I went there in the third grade, and went from the third to the sixth grade at Sacred Heart.
Okay.
And that was taught by nuns, Sisters of St. Joseph. And then Marist started, Marist being an all-boys school, much like Brophy, except it was a military school, which in the South was a big thing, military schools. So we wore uniforms and we had sabers and guns.
And Don was like an officer, and you were this.
Oh, yeah, because see, 4 years apart, that was,
Yeah.
yeah, he was really tough on me too, but, and Don was very, as you remember, Stacy, he was not only very sensitive, he was very intelligent. And I don't know what happened to me. The story goes that when we were moving to Atlanta, we went by train, and Dad was already in Atlanta and traveling, so he couldn't go with us. So Mom had Don and me. I was just 3 months old, and Don was 4 years old. And Don had to go, this is a story, Don had to go to the bathroom, so I was in a basket. And I've been in a basket pretty much since, but no, she left me on the train seat in my basket, and she took Don to the bathroom, and the trains in those days, would go in, and I fell out of the basket hit my head on the floor, and this is what happened to me.
This is the explanation.
And this is the explanation of why I was always slower than the rest, although When Stacy and I were talking the other day, and she was explaining to me about ADD, and I never really understood it, but I understand it a lot better now. I think I had ADD. What's that again?
Attention deficit
I
disorder.
think I had that. In addition to other problems.
Falling on your head syndrome.
Right, right. But anyway, so then we lived there on 4th Street until, I don't know what year it was, but then Mom and Dad bought the little house in Decatur. I think it cost them like $4,000.
It's probably, yeah.
And she lived there until,
Until she was how
Until-
old? Until, when did
80-something.
you guys move her out of that house?
Oh God, she was in her 70s then, and she moved to that retirement home. But she had she bought into that. She had
Right.
that other apartment. Did you ever see that?
Yeah, I did.
On Claremont.
Claremont Place or something.
Yeah, but it was really it was
She
a
loved it.
retirement home that she had,
Yeah.
and she loved it there. It was really good because she was living in our old house, but she was kind of going paranoid, and she thought the neighbors were breaking in and moving. We had a big concrete wall next to the house, and she thought they were moving that wall.
she did, she got a little
Yeah.
paranoid. And
She also thought
let her
the
hear.
phone company was listening in
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
on her calls.
They probably were though.
They might have been. It's hard to say. But when she went to Claremont Place, it's like her world opened up again.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
She became social and
Yeah.
she was busy.
She was, yeah. She loved it there, and that was really good for, for her
Yeah.
retirement. Dad that was one of the funny things. Dad had a couple strokes or whatever it was. But anyway, he died at the little house in Decatur. And he had a heart attack, and he died on the living room floor. So when they were selling the house, this friend of Mom's was in the real estate business, Norma Willis. And Norma called me and she said, "Paul, we've got to do something with your mother." She said, "Can you get her out of the house when I'm showing the house?" Because she tells everybody, about where your dad died, and nobody wants to buy the house.
Right. Well, then you were at Marist, and Don
Yeah.
was your officer, and then finally you graduated from Marist High School.
Yeah, Marist, of course, was all boys, all military, but it had a girls' school, right, just like,
This is the school like
Brophy.
just like Brophy and
Yeah.
Xavier.
Oh, okay.
So the girls would, we'd invite the girls to the proms and the dances and one thing or another. So, yeah.
That's where you worked as a soda jerk in town there, and you were putting girls' initials and whipped cream in there.
Yeah, but the girls were those girls were college students at Agnes Scott, which was right close to the drugstore where I worked. Yeah, I was a soda jerk there, and other things. But, yeah, let's see, where was I
You had your first girlfriend in high school. What was her name? Name you used to always kind of.
Oh, Jean Jones.
Jean Jones. Yeah.
Yeah, everybody said I made that up, but no, that was she was a real girl. And girl, I can't remember her name. Should remember, but the other girl went to Sacred Heart, so she was right, a Catholic girl. Jean was not Catholic; she was a Baptist, but. And her mother was dying of cancer. I'll never forget, because I come home from school and we'd go over to Jane's house. And she was kind of a heavy girl, but great personality, which worked out fine for me.
That did. And when did you get the calling for the priesthood,
The calling,
or whatever? How did you make that?
Who called you?
the call. I think it really, in those days, it's hard for you guys to envision that, but being a Catholic, the priest was a very respectable, dominant position in our community. and that was part of the Irish tradition, also part of the German tradition, Catholic tradition. The priest was the teacher, the preacher, and really was the leader of the community. And then there were nuns and things like that. Well, on Mom's side of the family, her mother, Agnes was her name. Mom hated the name Agnes, but she was Mary Agnes. But Mom's mother's side of the family, they had two nuns, Sister Adelphine and Sister Loretta. You don't remember them, I don't think. They were in a German Franciscan order. And then one of Grandma Wright's brothers was a priest. So there was a tradition of religious priests and one thing or another. And when I grew up, the priest was the role of the priest in the community was a very respected role. And when I went to Catholic school, every time the nuns would ask, okay, now you boys in the classroom, now how many of you are going to be priests? Everybody raised their hand.
Really?
Oh yeah, all the boys.
A little bit different than today.
Yeah. Oh yeah, today nobody would raise their hand, but so I guess was influenced at that point. And I thought, well, that would be a pretty good profession. It was respected. You were well educated. The priests were well educated.
Did Don ever think about it? Do you know? Did you ever have that conversation with him? No.
I don't think he did.
Because that's the irony. He truly became much more religious at the end.
Don would have been the better
in the
priest.
counseling and stuff.
Yeah, Don would have been a better priest. I know that Dad had a strong influence on Don in guiding him into engineering. But Don was a very good student.
Right, it makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, he was probably really good at math. And
He was.
good grades.
I don't remember either Mom or Dad encouraging the priesthood. As a matter of fact, no. As a matter of fact, on Dad's side, his family was kind of opposed, especially Grandma Kelley. She thought it was a waste of my youth and my good looks and charming personality and everything else.
Your athletic prowess.
Yeah, athletic prowess to become a priest, But on Mom's side, because there was so many priests, there was priests and nuns and everybody else, then it was encouraged on that side. So there was encouragement, and again, it was a respected type of thing when I went in to the seminary. But anyway, I went in through Marist. I did okay at Marist. I still was not a good student, but I was right at average. We had 100 kids in the senior class, and I was like 51. Not the best, but.
But then where did you go to college after that?
Well, then I went into the seminary, which was St. Mary's University in Baltimore.
Okay.
I didn't know your mother at that time.
It's kind of funny you were
Although
there.
she was in school there at, where did she go?
Village of Lee?
Yeah, Village of Lee or whatever it was, yeah. Mount St. Mary's or one of, can't remember the.
And she would actually go to masses at the seminary, right? Where you were.
Well, yeah, but the cathedral was right close by. Her uncle, of course, was the bishop and later cardinal in Baltimore. So, yeah, she had to go to church all the time. That's why in later years she never felt that she really needed to go.
She'd done her time.
Right, she had done her time.
Yeah.
So you were in the seminary then, and you got an undergraduate degree, and then you went on to get 2 master's degrees, correct?
Well, yeah. The seminary consisted of an 8-year course. It took me 9 years, but Other
Sounds about right.
normally
Yeah.
went to an
Well, one year
8
had to learn Latin, right?
Yeah, I had to go to a special Latin class, yeah. But the, yeah, the first 4 years were college years, 2 years of regular liberal arts college, and then 2 years of philosophy. That was your college. Then you got a bachelor's degree from that. Then you went into 4 years of theology. And so they moved us from one school to another. Packer Street was the old school, the oldest seminary in the United States. And then St. Mary's in Roland Park in Baltimore, real close to where Mary Ellen was raised and close to the cathedral. So yeah, I would go, they would send the boys to the cathedral. We would sing and one thing or another. And Mary Ellen was there at that time. I didn't know her. You know,
So
but-
what years were you in Baltimore then, about?
Well, let's see. I was ordained in '64. So that was after the 4 years. So 60 in 1960.
60, oh.
50.
Were you ordained in Baltimore?
I was ordained to what they had, the deacon, and then your diaconate year, which was your last year in the seminary. And then I was ordained in Atlanta at the Cathedral of Christ the King there by Archbishop Hallinan, who was a very good friend of mine and a wonderful, wonderful priest.
Were you able to select going back to Atlanta? That's where you wanted to go be?
Yeah, in the priesthood, you either were in a religious order like the Jesuits or the Benedictines or Dominicans or whatever, or you were a diocesan priest, and that's what I was.
Okay.
So you belonged to a particular diocese area and so I belonged to the Diocese of Atlanta, Archdiocese of Atlanta, and that's, so I would go back to Atlanta.
Okay.
And so that's then, while I was in Baltimore, I went to Loyola University, which was real close by there. I could walk from the seminary to Loyola. And it was there I got a master's degree in education, which I thank God for, because when I left the priesthood, that was at my avenue for work, you know.
Right.
But yeah, that was a good move to get that master's degree. So I actually had the 4 years of theology. You graduated from that 4 years with what was called a licentiate of sacred theology. And that was a license to teach theology. It's comparable to a master's degree. In education, if you don't have a master's degree, you can't teach, I think.
Yeah, you can't.
And so the licentiate was the same thing. So my diploma, you know, said STL, licentiate of sacred theology. So those were my 2 degrees. Yeah.
And once then you were ordained in Atlanta. From there, did you go directly as a leader in the school? What was the first
No,
job?
the first job that I had, first assignment was to Our Lady of the Assumption Parish, north central Phoenix. And this wonderful old guy, Monsignor Moylan, who had been the Vicar General. I mean, that's next to being a bishop. That was as high as you could get. He was a brilliant man. And he ran the church in Georgia, both Savannah and Atlanta. But he was very old, and he had these glasses that were like bottles,
Yeah.
you know. And,
Coke bottle
yeah,
glasses.
so he couldn't drive, and I was his chauffeur. So he made us, myself and the other priest that was there, we had to count the collection on Sunday, and then he wouldn't let any of the lay people touch the money. And then on Monday morning, we'd have to go to the back, so I'd drive him down to the back, and he's kind of funny old guy. But, yeah, so Our Lady of the Assumption was first assignment. And then what happened, Marist moved from downtown, where I went, Ivy Street, which is the old school, and they moved out to North Phoenix, North Atlanta. And so they made an exchange where the Marist fathers moved from Sacred Heart Parish in downtown Atlanta to Our Lady of the Assumption. And Monsignor Moreland and I moved from Our Lady of the Assumption to the old Sacred Heart Parish, right in the heart of downtown Atlanta.
Right.
You
Just off Main Street.
you preached from there.
I did stand up on the altar there. Scared your mom.
Yeah, I bet you did. But that was really funny, going back to that church, because that's where I made my first communion and confirmation and the first few years of school at Sacred Heart.
Yeah.
So there I was in the same old place. I love that church, and it's one of those beautiful old churches, you know.
Right,
So
right.
when did you become principal?
Well, I was there at Sacred Heart as an assistant pastor, and then the bishop, because I had my degree in education, they started a high school where the old Sacred Heart Girls' School was, in that building where I went to grammar school, and so I was stationed at Sacred Heart, and I then started teaching English at St. Joseph's High School.
So that was a new school, St. Joseph's was a new
It
school.
was a brand new school
Right,
at that time. And so I continued to teach there, then became the assistant principal, and then became the principal of that school. And that's where, you know, I met Bob Maher,
Mhm.
and that's where I met your mother. That then becomes, you know, we had a graduation ceremony. I can't remember what year it was. I think it was 68, with it, somewhere in there anyway. And I met Kemp, who was another priest, and he was teaching religion there. I was the principal. The assistant principal was a sister named Sister Placide, really strict old-time nun, and another nun. And the four of us were having dinner, and we was, in those days, we still wore the things. The nuns had changed from the old habit to the new habit,
Mhm.
but it was still, you could identify them as nuns. And Matt and I were still in our priestly garb, and so we were sitting there having dinner
At Pity Pat's porch.
at Pity Pat's porch.
Which we tried to go to one time, but.
I've been there, yeah.
You've been.
Yeah, Tim has called me from
Yeah.
there a couple times. It's been, Pilar, you haven't?
I've been there.
Have you been there?
Yeah,
Oh,
I
okay,
am
so
very, very good.
you know what I'm talking about. That was, you know, an old restaurant in Atlanta at the time. Typical Southern style,
Mhm.
but right in the heart of downtown, but close to St. Joe's. You could walk from the school to Pity Pat's. But your mother and Paul Shields, her former husband, and Jack Patterson's mom and dad were there, and Jack was graduating from Marist, and so they were celebrating Jack's graduation. We were celebrating the graduation at St. Joe's, and so Paul Shields sent a bottle of wine over to champagne or whatever it was to my table. And so I got up and went over to their table, and that's where I met your mother. Yeah. And I was immediately struck by her.
Ah, looks.
By her.
I'm sure.
I'm sure she was struck by you too.
But nothing happened there between us for a couple of years. A year anyway.
But then she began, the relationship remained. You were friends with Paul Shields, and you had students
Well,
needed
that
before.
was it. Jack was graduating from Marist at the time, and he was going to Georgetown. And that was before his accident where he broke his back. But and you knew Jack.
Yeah, I know Jack.
Right. So he was moving out, and they had the extra bedroom. So at that time, Bob Marr was a student at St. Joe's, and he was living with his brother with some weirdo, a guy that was really weird, and the guy was abusing Bob and his brother. Bob came to me at that time. I was the principal of the school, and he asked me if I could, he said, I've got to get out of that thing, that house. And so I asked Paul Shields if they could, and then I went to their house and actually then met your mother. Had to get her approval, for Bob to come and live there.
So Bob was the first one that went and lived there?
Yeah.
How did it occur to you to ask them to house Bob? How did that
Well,
come to be?
there was another priest that actually did the invitation or the in-between thing, Jim Shearer, who was head of Catholic Social Services. Good friend of mine. And so he's the one that recommended that maybe they would take Bob Marr. And so then...
I wondered, did they know them through Catholic Social Services because of the adoptions? Because of Brooke and then later me?
Maybe.
I mean, because that's
Maybe.
where we were adopted through, right? Catholic Social Services.
Yeah. But no, well, you were adopted right around that time.
66.
66, yeah. But see, then Paul Shields, you don't remember that much about Paul Shields because he started, he had a change. He had been very successful news
Anchorman.
anchorman for WSB in Atlanta. And then they took him out of that position and moved him into sales. And he couldn't make the adjustment. And I guess it has to do with being in the television business or being in the movie business. Your image of yourself, it's one thing, and he could never make the adaptation.
To being behind the scenes.
By being behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And so he had a mental breakdown. And it was very serious. and he was doing really weird things, dangerous. I mean, he had a couple of accidents and one thing and another. And he'd come down to the school and he'd talk to me, and he was supposed to be working, but he wasn't. And so that's when I got to know Mary Ellen much better, because she had to decide what to do about Paul's mental condition. And so what her family got involved in the thing. Brother George came down, and
Uncle Lawrence as well, didn't he?
well, and Uncle Lawrence made arrangements for Paul Shields to go to there's a big mental hospital there in Baltimore, where he was diagnosed with a strange kind of disease that was terminal. And they diagnosed him with that, and he was getting worse and worse and really weird. And so Mary Ellen, I went with her. We took Paul to the hospital up there in a plane that belonged to one of the parishioners that I knew very well. And so Paul was in the mental hospital there. They diagnosed him, and then they couldn't do anything with him. I mean, he was attacking the nurses and doing all kinds of crazy things. And so through my contacts in Atlanta, one of my students, her father was a psychiatrist and head of the DeKalb County mental health program. And so we got Paul into a mental hospital there in DeKalb County, which is where Decatur is. Mary Ellen went to visit him every day, but she couldn't take the kids anymore because it was just too much for you. And
I have no memory. I have no memory.
You don't remember
Not
this?
any memories. No, I don't know what he looks like. I have no memory of him at all.
no, well, you
I mean, I was
were three.
3 turning 4 when
Yeah.
we moved to Phoenix. So.
Right. So you were 2.
Yeah, it
you
was
know,
2. Yeah.
1
So
and
happy.
2.
Yeah.
You wouldn't
Yeah.
have remembered.
Mm-mm.
And Brooke was wild even then. I mean,
Right.
but you know, with her father being a mental case, I mean, that didn't work out very well at
Yeah.
all. So, but anyway, then Mary Ellen divorced Paul while he was in the mental hospital. He was totally, completely out of it. I mean, you know, and so that she got the divorce before we had any arrangements to get married. But I was at that point. Archbishop Hallinan had died. There was a change in the church. One of the big things that happened was that the Second Vatican Council was at that time, and the church's teaching on birth control was a major issue, and I just couldn't, in conscience, preach and teach the church's teaching that birth control, other than through the what was it?
Natural family planning or
Well,
Rhythm method.
rhythm.
the rhythm method, yeah. That was the only legitimate way. And here, my brother, they tried the rhythm method and ended up with 5 girls, one after the other, you know. So they had rhythm, but it wasn't it wasn't working right. And but that created a major conflict in my mind as a priest. And I fully expected, because the Vatican Council, John the 23rd had passed on Paul the Sixth, I think it was Paul the Sixth, had taken over, and they had created a council of lay people and bishops and priests who were supposed to now make a new judgment about birth control. Well, they just put the rubber stamp on the old system, and any kind of artificial method of birth control was considered sinful. And it was because you'd hear confessions, and it was a real trauma for, not only for women, but for men like Don, who realized that this thing wasn't working, but couldn't he couldn't in good conscience use any kind of artificial
The
birth
only
control.
way they stopped having children was to separate.
That's right.
I mean, they divorced.
And
didn't
that,
work.
were you there when the girls explained what happened with their divorce?
We listened to some of their
You heard
stories.
some of it, I heard
Yeah.
some of it, not all of it.
Far more traumatic than I had
Oh, yeah,
realized.
it was.
Yeah.
So St. Joseph's High School was the first
It
integrated?
was the first integrated school. What happened, there was an all-black Catholic school out where the Atlanta University is, which is Morehouse, and all of those. They were all black schools. And so Bishop Hallinan, when the law in Georgia was passed, that allowed for integration of schools, then Archbishop Hallinan closed the black school. At that time, St. Joe's had just been started, a couple of years, but it was all white, and so then then half of St. Joe's became black. I mean, and it was a real experience in integrating that school. The kids did a phenomenal job. We got into a number of fights at football games because we were integrated, and they were playing schools that
Schools
were all
orange?
white. Yeah.
Oh.
And
How did it work within your own school though? Like, did you have a lot of conflict?
oh yeah, it was, you would imagine, but and it was very interesting because St. Joe's had a real. It was much like St. Mary's here, a real diverse student body. A lot of poor kids, a lot of very rich. And Atlanta has today and had and at that time a very wealthy black community. Interestingly, the black community's wealth started with makeup. And we were talking about that the other day, that black people before had no makeup of their own, and so somebody invented black makeup. They made a fortune on it.
And they started their own banking services and
As a matter of fact, the bank that Mary Ellen and I used when we first got started was the Citizens in Southern, I think it was the black bank in Atlanta.
because you were so scandalous.
Yeah.
So how did the love story start then?
Well, it kind of developed as Mary Ellen got her divorce. I made the decision I was going to take a leave of absence from the priesthood because of the conflicts, and I just couldn't, I couldn't justify the teachings of the church. Besides that, the celibacy thing was a big
Getting
problem for me.
It's getting old.
It's getting old, yeah.
And so Mary Ellen and I would visit with her quite frequently because I was helping her with one thing or another. One of my students' parents owned a house at Hilton, and it was a beautiful place. It was right on the ocean, And I went down there a couple times with myself or with another priest and all that. And so Mary Ellen and I were flying back from Baltimore one time, and she was down to 90-something pounds. Just had been worried, had just gotten through the divorce, had these 2 kids, And so I said, "No, why don't you go with me and we'll go down. I've got this house at Hilton's Head." I said, "It'd be real good and just have a long weekend." So Peg, Mary Ellen's mother, came down from Baltimore and
To watch us?
watched the girls for the weekend. She knew damn well what we were doing.
She maybe supported it.
Mary Ellen told her that she was going down there with a couple nuns.
She was still lying to her mother.
Yeah, lying to her
Never
mother.
ends.
Yeah. But Peg knew what was going on. But Mary Ellen and I we spent the whole time on the floor. There's a beautiful fireplace, in this house, and every room you could see the ocean.
Wow.
From all. It was just beautiful. And but we obviously talked a lot. That was one of the problems that Mary Ellen and I had. We talked. Too
Talked
much.
incessantly.
Talked
Yeah.
incessantly.
Yeah.
And but that was the first. That was the beginning of the end, or the
Beginning.
Beginning of the beginning.
And,
Didn't she say that she was willing to be your mistress?
oh yeah.
Or imagine this
Yeah,
scandal.
I thought that was a pretty good
That was a
idea.
pretty good offer.
Yeah, I could have the best of both worlds.
Not deal with those kids.
Yeah, right. But no, I left the priesthood, and it was shortly after that we decided to get married.
Like shortly meaning a few days.
Well, no, it was a little longer than that, but yeah, pretty close.
Because you were married June
June
We were
6th.
married on June the 6th.
6th.
Yeah,
1970.
right.
And it
But
seems.
we knew each other and were like going together, getting together, for that whole year
Mhm.
of '69.
Mm.
And so then in June of 1970, we decided to get married. We got married, Mary Ellen wanted to get married outside, outdoors. We couldn't very well get married in the church.
You could.
And we didn't want to,
Because of the
make
cardinal,
big
yeah,
announcement in the paper or
Right.
anything, as, that it just wouldn't have gone over very well,
So who picked the
ex-priest
location?
Mary's,
Please.
Right,
Mary's cardinal's niece, it didn't-
divorce niece.
Yeah, divorced
Divorcee.
cardinal's niece,
Mhm.
just wouldn't have gone over very well. So, what did what did we do? We,
The
Well,
grotto.
the
You got married
cemetery.
at The cemetery.
oh, yeah, that was what I was gonna say. Mary Ellen wanted to get married outdoors, and she had several children by Paul Shields who died early. I think there was like 4 or 5. Do you remember?
I think 5.
It was 5, yeah.
Mhm.
And some of them were buried at Arlington Cemetery in Atlanta. So she was familiar with it, and there was this grotto. You've seen pictures of it.
It's a beautiful
Yeah.
place.
A beautiful grotto, and it's down in kind of this gully, and then there's this waterfall, and then this cave where they had like a tomb where Jesus would come out of the tomb, Well, I came out of the tomb. So she showed me this. I said, man, that would be perfect, So I got a friend of mine, Ed Conley, who was going to Emory University getting his degree. He was a teacher at St. Mary's. And I asked him if he would do the ceremony, and he did. And so we were married by a priest at Arlington Cemetery
And how many days later did you pack up the car and?
the next day.
Just
You know,
So
we
when
didn't
did you
invite
hatch
you
the
to.
plan though? I know, when did you hatch the plan to
Yeah, you
make
weren't
the
there.
break out of Atlanta? Like how long before the wedding was that plan hatched?
Oh, that plan was hatched for a whole year.
Okay,
Which we,
was that Hilton Head
that was
plan
a-
hatching or was it after Hilton Head?
it was probably part of the Hilton Head planning session.
The school ended, and you wrote letters to the entire community that you were resigning from the
I
church.
still have that letter.
Yeah, I read them, I sent you a couple copies of them.
Did you?
We've
Yeah.
got them here, yeah.
It was a good letter, yeah.
Is that, but you
And
had
I
to
wrote
tell,
to all the family too.
but then you also had to tell your mother
Oh,
and your father.
yeah.
This is funny, because
Yeah.
you chose a restaurant that,
In Atlanta, they have this restaurant, it's in an old church. And it's on Piedmont Drive, right where Piedmont hits Peachtree. And so it's a great restaurant. And I didn't realize it, but that was, I had a driver's training car from St. Joe's. And I picked up Mom and Dad, and we went there. And so we had a couple drinks there, more than we should have had. But it helped to, kind of smooth things over, because there I explained to Mom and Dad that I was leaving the priesthood. My mother broke down into tears, and, because I had gotten her a job at the village, St. Joseph's Village, which is that kind of orphanage-like thing. And so she was really now very involved in, with the nuns and the whole thing. So, I explained to them that I was leaving the priesthood. Mom starts crying again in the car, and in this car, it was the driver's training car, and it had a brake on the passenger side, so that the teacher could stop the car
For
if he had
emergency,
to.
yeah.
Well, Mom was sitting on that side, I'm driving, and Mom was crying away. She
Oh,
slammed down,
no.
and the car was going. I said, Mom, would you stop putting on the brakes, So finally, but she loved Mary Ellen,
Yeah.
and Dad did too. I mean,
Yeah.
that was,
But she knew them, she knew Don beforehand,
well, Don knew Paul Shields, yeah.
and he had written letters to Mary Ellen while he was getting his divorce.
Yeah, that was another thing, and she was very,
Wait,
very much.
Uncle Don wrote letters to,
To Mamie.
Yeah, Mamie
to
was helping him through his divorce with Kathy before she was even involved with Pops.
no,
That was
can't
back in, it was
be-
in.
No, that can't be right. When did Don and Kathy divorce? I mean, I remember visiting them
Well, they
when they were
visited
still
us out,
together,
at
and they
here in
visited
Phoenix.
us. So that couldn't have been, that hadn't
No,
been a
because
different,
she was
that
2
timing
years
doesn't
old.
work out,
So
yeah.
what was it?
Well, that's true, because when Mary Ellen was communicating with Don, it was after we were married.
Okay, yeah.
So
Oh.
that would have happened, yeah, and Don was going through his divorce. We had already gone through our deal and were married and had moved to
Moved to
Phoenix.
Phoenix, yeah.
So that's what, because remember that one Christmas that they came out,
Yeah,
and they were married at that time, and then Don got divorced after that.
and was that the
Then
year that we got
Melissa-
nothing?
Huh?
Was that the year we got nothing?
I think so, yeah. And then Melissa came and lived with us for a year.
Right, right.
What year is that?
I was,
Would have been 70. How old were you when?
How old were you when we
I
got
was
nothing?
5.
you were 5,
My fifth birthday, I
so
think.
71 to 76, so yeah, late 70s, 77, probably
When you
78.
got nothing, yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, then the whole thing about the job, when I came out to Phoenix in March of that 69, I put in an application at several different places to get a job when I knew I was leaving the priesthood. And so I was applying to various schools. I applied, Mary Ellen and I had talked about it, that if we had a choice, we wanted to go to either Denver, Albuquerque, or Phoenix. Because we wanted to be in a city that had a university that was something like Atlanta and was growing. And so I put in applications in all those places, and I got accepted by the Phoenix Union High School District as an assistant principal and teacher at South Mountain High School. And there was the nicest lady who was the secretary to the superintendent of Phoenix Union High School District. And so she was just really, she befriended me and was real nice. Well, then we moved down, I'm thinking I have this job, and that was in August when we moved. It was 118 degrees in Phoenix. I thought Mary Ellen was going to die, Yeah, unfortunately we had air conditioning in the car, but in that old house,
Yeah.
the one we rented, there was only one room that had air conditioning. And that was ours, of course.
Right.
So then, well, let's see, what...
So you got to Phoenix thinking you had a job.
Yeah, thinking that I had a job, and I went down to see the superintendent of schools, and he said, "I'm awfully sorry, Paul, but our funding was cut, and that job is not available."
Oh, no.
Yeah, and so I had to go home and tell Mary Ellen that I didn't have a job. She said, "Well, Paul, I said, I'll find something, but that not work." And so she'd pack a lunch for me, and send me off at 8 o'clock every morning.
So you
I had
to go.
I couldn't come
the
home.
pavement.
I couldn't come home. I had to stay. I'd drive around town, and eat my lunch out of a bag, No, but then I would have interviews in one place or another. But I kept going back to the secretary at Phoenix Union High School. Eloise Blummel was her name. Never forget her. And she said, "Look, I know the secretary. Those secretaries all know one another. I know the secretary of the state superintendent of school, Weldon Schofstall, Dr. Schofstall." And she said, "I'll make an appointment for you to go to see her." And so I went down and talked to that secretary and had an appointment with Dr. Schofstall. They were just setting up this drug education program. and they were going to have a training program in San Francisco. And so he hired me on the spot, which is just unbelievable for the state, because normally you have to go through all kinds of things, you know, and waiting and everything else, but they had to have, it was a combination of Department of Public Safety guys, the undercover agents, some people from the health department, and educators.
Okay.
And so I became one of the educators. And they made me the assistant director. And this guy from the Department of Public Safety, who was an undercover agent, Don Percunia, he was was director of the program. And so Dr. Sonsfeld said, well, Paul, now, this job is yours if you can get to San Francisco and be a part of this training program. I said, well, I can't go if I got to take my wife and kids. I said, I can't leave them in Phoenix. You know, we just got married. We just moved to Phoenix, and this was a matter of weeks after we you know. So, and we were renting this house over.
Near Kento, or where was that?
Close. It was on 19th Avenue or somewhere over there.
Mm-hmm.
Little tiny place. I remember our bedroom, because we had that big double bed,
King size bed.
king size bed,
Yeah.
and that took up the whole room. There was no other room. And so anyway, we packed up the car and drove to San Francisco. And we had a good time up there, but that's where we were at the
Bell Motel.
Bell Motel. Stacy
In the
remembers the
city.
Bell Motel.
Very vaguely, yeah.
That's where you learn the finger.
Apparently, that's where.
Yeah.
On information and belief. So the story goes.
So how long were you there? 2 months? Couple months?
I guess we were there. We had to be a couple
Probably
months.
just a month, yeah.
Yeah. But it was this training program at San Francisco State College.
Right, it wasn't
It
university back
wasn't
then.
university at that
Yeah.
time. But San Francisco, this was 1970, and San Francisco, we were in the middle of the Haight-Ashbury area. I mean,
Yeah,
this was right.
Right.
I mean, this was
Wow,
right.
70s is
Oh,
crazy over
Hippies
there.
everywhere.
It was.
Hippies and drugs and.
Oh,
Yeah, it was really.
I'm sure
Yeah.
Mary Ellen didn't like it as much.
No, that was something else. But we were going to be in the drug education program, so they, you
That
know,
was the place to learn what was going on, huh?
we got the best education that you could get. And so Mary Ellen started this, it wasn't a daycare thing, what would you call that?
Head Start, I guess.
Head Start is
Yeah.
what she called it. Because this motel had a bunch of truck drivers and their families. And so the family stayed in the motel with these little kids, bunch of little kids. I don't know how many little kids there were, but these were rough kids. I mean, you know, and Stacy learned some terrible things there. I came home one night, you know, from school, and I said, Stacy, how was your day? She gave me the finger. I said, where did you learn that? Oh, my friends, you know. But Mary Ellen starts this kind of program for these kids because they had to have something to do, you know. And but that was kind of an interesting.
So you worked for the drug for a while, for the
Then you
States?
came back.
Yeah, then we came back to Phoenix and started this program. That drug education program was really interesting because we traveled the whole state. We would go to various school districts and schools and all the colleges and universities. The junior college system, I really got a lot of respect at that time because we would go and run these seminars. And at that time, the teachers and parents knew nothing about drugs. The kids knew a lot more than the parents, which is typical, you know.
Yeah.
But drugs were everywhere at that time. And parents just said, no, we don't have any drugs in our way. But because we had these undercover agents working with us, they said, oh, no, and then they would tell the
Right.
stories of what was going on in those.
Would you go into the high schools too, or just the colleges?
No, we went into high school, we went into whatever school districts, you know, like Phoenix Union High School.
Were you teaching the teachers or were you teaching the students about?
We were teaching the teachers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, not the students.
Yeah.
But parents and teachers.
Okay.
So we would go to parent association meetings,
Right,
teachers,
PTAs,
but we
yeah.
traveled the whole state. And that's why we had assigned to us state patrol cars.
Mm.
And I had one had sirens and
Wow.
spotlights and everything
Oh,
like
great.
that. So when Mary Ellen at that was pregnant with Tim, we had the state car and I drove down to St. Joe's Hospital with the siren going and the spotlight and the spotlights and everything else there.
Out of the way.
We got Tim in. Yeah, that was really interesting.
So then after the state, you went to work for,
Well, Mary Ellen and I, Mary Ellen put Stacy in Leslie Jeunesse, at that time Raglan. She was the headmistress at a preschool.
Central Methodist.
Methodist preschool.
On Central.
And your mom was driving wherever it was, because we had just bought the house on Pasadena. And your mom was driving Central Avenue and saw the sign out in front of the Central Methodist about preschool. So she went in, met Leslie, and put Stacy in this school. Well, one of the other students in there was Alexis Randolph. And so Mary Ellen met the Randolphs, who lived in the Phoenix Country Club. So we got to know all those people, and there were a lot of investment people and the bankers, and Vic Randolph was a lawyer. So we got into the social thing, and your mom was, you know, she was very popular with the women, and I was very popular with the women also. I was noted for reading palms, and that was the way I got the women. I could hold their hand. No, my reputation spread, but we were young and didn't know any better. But things were going well. Stacy was in school. Brooke was in
She would have been at Madison Park.
Madison Park
Yeah.
at that time. Yeah, she was there for I think 2 years, and then.
No, we were there longer. Brooke started St. Francis in 5th grade because I started St. Francis in 3rd grade. We're 2
Oh,
years
is that
apart.
right? Oh,
So
okay.
I went to Madison Park
You were
1st
at
and
Madison
2nd grade.
Right.
And Brooke must have gone 1st grade through 4th
Right.
grade. Yeah.
Right.
And then you went to San Francisco.
And then they moved us to St. Francis, yeah. I think there's a story about you going to a parent-teacher conference night or an open house
And you
night.
didn't like it.
And everybody knew who Brooke was and nobody knew who I was.
Right,
And
that's right.
I think they thought I was getting lost in the crowd or
Yeah,
something,
yeah, they
so,
didn't even know your name.
No.
Just that little girl.
yeah. So that's when you
But
decided, that was
everybody knew
2nd
Brooke.
grade, that's when you decided to pull us out and put us at St. Francis.
Yeah, right. Right,
even though you'd already been living in the house on Pasadena.
yeah.
Well,
For a
Madison
couple of
Park would have
years.
was the local school for us, right there, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
Because I started kindergarten at St.
yeah,
Francis.
you started, yeah.
And I was
And
at the Montessori
then how do
preschool.
you start the solar company? Because that
Well,
was a big,
What happened was Vic Randolph started a company, and they made me the president of this company.
wow.
The name of the company was.
So you quit your job with
I
the,
left the state and went in
the
with
private.
Vic Randolph, an engineer from ASU, and anesthesiologist.
It's a strange combination.
Well, they all became
Patient-
investors and
And
partners.
Patient Corporation.
Inpatient Corporation was the name of the business. And the theory of the business was to create a card, like a credit card, that you could use with any doctor and for insurance and everything. It was a novel, and really, it was way ahead of its time. Well, we weren't able to raise enough money, is what really happened. And so that business it went out of business.
How long did you do that? Do you remember
It
how
was a
many?
couple of years, because we were actually operating but manually doing all this stuff. And I had, a room full of people that we had hired. That's when I hired Doug Cotner, because he had been in the Navy. This is a guy who became a good friend of ours, and a funny guy, but he worked with us in that company.
Which is ironic because that's what they're trying to do now, consolidate one thing in one.
Exactly.
You guys just were
It's
ahead
still-
of the,
Yeah.
It's still
But
on.
You
without
had a computer,
technology,
right? A
without-
giant
Yeah, without the
technology,
technology and
Well,
yeah,
internet
it
in
was,
the back,
it
or
was a
what
good
was
Yeah,
that?
that was
idea.
one of
Yeah.
the first computers.
Yeah, we had this huge, we had a building at, right at the ASU campus, and we had this huge computer. In those days, the computers had all these tapes that would run,
Right.
and the big machines with those stuff, it was just unbelievable. And all this had to be built up with air conditioning because these
It would
computers
be
over.
Right.
Those were the early days of computers.
But then you went straight from Patient Corporation to the water conditioner?
Well, what happened was that company went out of business, Patient Corporation, and I was out of work. I mean, I didn't have any income.
Yeah.
And so then I answered an ad to sell water conditioners.
Mhm.
And that's where I met Lowell Folletta and started it on that. And then they for, I don't know, for a while, I just sold water
Sold, yeah.
conditioners.
that's
Door
where
to
you
door.
met, what's his name too? The painter.
Andre,
Andre Blanchet?
That's right, Andre was, well, I became a manager in the water conditioning business, and Andre was selling water conditioners just to get enough money to buy paint. And he had been in, was he in Aruba or where?
wasn't he in Spain?
Yeah, he was
For
in
years?
Spain for a year, and he had gone through a divorce, and he had been what was it, some kind of graphic art work.
Oh, he was on Madison Avenue.
Yeah, Madison Avenue.
Yeah, in advertising.
Advertising, yeah.
So
Funny guy, but he was selling water conditioners for me. I was the manager of the office at the time, and there was another guy named Lefty Morris who had been a
Lefty, yeah.
professional baseball player. You remember Lefty?
I do.
And he and Andre were real good friends. So I invited them for dinner, and Mary Ellen loved to have dinner, and so we had these formal dinners. And Andre brought roses for Mary Ellen. Well, boy, that's all she needed. She fell in love with Andre.
Right.
And he was a really womanizer.
Yeah.
Yeah, but a neat guy and a lot of fun. And so they became very good friends of ours. Andre later got married to a girl named Rosie, who really helped him a lot. I don't know whatever happened to Lefty, but he kept selling water conditioners for the longest time. Anyway, then from the water conditioning business, when the solar industry started to develop, and then we decided to set up a direct sales organization selling solar equipment. That's the way we sold water conditioners, but we developed a novel approach to selling the solar units. And instead of going door to door, which is what we did with the water conditioner, with the solar units, we set up seminars. And Tim, you and Pat Donaldson
Oh, yeah.
and Stacy, you worked with us. Were you working with us at that time, or?
Yeah, I worked at Sunland in several
Right.
summers, yeah.
that's great that you guys got to work and
Yeah.
see the company grow and.
Oh, yeah, and that
Up
kind
and down.
Yeah.
yeah, the up and down. But we became the third largest manufacturer and distributor of solar equipment in the United States. Initially, we bought units from
China.
Israel. We bought a unit from Israel, And then we created our own unit, and we had this factory out in Tempe.
Yeah,
And
44th
that's,
Street and like Broadway.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's-
around
I
that's
there.
worked in the factory.
yeah, you worked there in the factory?
I worked in the office.
And Phil, and
Oh,
the
yeah.
girls at that time, Katie and Allison were just little.
Little, yeah.
But Brooke was in the hospital again, and Phil and the girls were living with us.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah. I would walk the girls to school.
Yeah, and you had to live down in the pit, because they took over your bedroom upstairs.
Yeah.
But,
Considering that you guys got to work there and
Yeah.
that's part of your history.
Yeah.
but that's where we got into the solar business. And that company was very successful until when Reagan became president. Jimmy Carter preceded Reagan as president. And Jimmy Carter passed legislation called the National Energy Act. And it provided credits for people if they bought solar equipment, put it on their house, just to heat water, but they, you-
Tax credits.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was a tax credit. And it actually, then the state passed legislation, so that if you were paying income tax, you basically got the whole amount back,
Mhm.
in refunds,
Very
from
big
your
incentive.
tax credit. Well, some of the sales companies got into trouble. They were telling people that, that they were gonna get this money back whether they pay taxes or not.
Right.
But,
that's not
and
true.
so
Yeah.
that's where the problem came in. But nonetheless, that program really helped initially, and it was,
Mhm.
when you think of, there were subsidies for every gas, natural gas,
Mhm.
all the rest. But anyway, then when Reagan got in, he did away with those tax credits. And that law was passed, and the solar industry vanished
Right.
overnight.
Yeah.
And we were,
That is.
I remember we were watching it on because you also started that satellite TV business.
oh, that's right, we had the satellites.
Mhm.
Remember that big?
Wait,
The big
Yeah.
satellite,
Yeah.
and the first satellites that came out, and we were looking to diversify, and so we got into the satellite TV thing, and the first dishes were huge.
They were
Huge.
10,
You remember
12.
seeing that?
Oh, we had
Oh,
one
they
in
were
the
huge,
backyard, it took half the backyard.
Oh my God, it's
Yeah.
hilarious.
It was just unbelievable, and it would move, and we had controls inside.
Mm.
Right.
That you would,
So you can
just,
move.
and this dish would move around, follow
It's crazy.
That was.
yeah.
The beginning of
And you were
satellite.
importing those
And then
from
the
Korea.
funny thing was that when we first got into the solar business, we went into business with this guy, I can't think of his name, but he had invented a parabolic collector. Parabolic being, it was aluminum, shiny aluminum, and parabolic like that, and it was on a rack, and it would follow the sun, and the sun would reflect off of the aluminum onto this pipe, and the water would run through the pipe, and it would heat the hot water. It's a brilliant concept, except what happened was there was a sensor on this little motor that ran this
Parabolic.
thing, the parabolic thing, and the birds would get
Oh,
would get on that sensor, and they would shit on the senscer, and the thing would
we
stop.
stop working?
And the thing would stop, and here it was just facing,
This-
the wrong
yeah.
direction. So we had service calls coming out of our ears and everything with it. That we ended up then getting away and importing units. So we were, but this guy didn't think, we were very successful sales company. I mean, we were very, the guys that I was working with. But Folletta was one who was really a neat guy, he was master salesman. But then we formed a partnership with the two brothers, the Papella brothers,
Mike and Easy.
Mike and Easy Papella. Mike's wife's name was believe it or not, Ella
Ella.
Papella. I'm not joking.
No.
Mary Ellen thought, oh my gosh. Well, anyway, Mary Ellen, we invited them for dinner, and the Papella boys, they had been, back in those days, professional wrestling was a big thing. The Papella boys were professional wrestlers, tag team wrestlers. Mike would be outside the ring, and he was in the ring. Can you imagine
No.
those guys doing that?
That's just crazy.
Yeah, but
These
then
were big boys too.
they were both big, yeah. I forget their nationality, but they were.
It had to be Italian.
Yeah,
It seemed like it was
well,
Italian,
Papella,
yes.
you would think, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and anyway, that was the partnership. Mary Ellen said, Folletta, Papella, what's Kelley doing in there?
Right, yeah.
Oh, Mary Ellen didn't like these guys at all. I mean,
No.
really. See,
To the mafia.
Who was the was it the controller, or there was one other, who was,
Ed,
Ed. I liked him, he was nice. Ed, what was his last name?
Was it Gillespie?
Ed Gillespie?
yeah, it was
Maybe.
I don't know why I would remember that.
Eddie Stick.
Eddie, I can't think of his last name either.
Let's call him Eddie. Yeah.
But yeah, but he was an Irishman too, and that was
Yeah.
a compliment. He came in with us later in the thing, but he brought some money in. And, but that company was very successful until, even after the tax credits, we continued to do good.
Mhm.
We did end up with a lawsuit with the Attorney General's office over the sales practices, and they because I was the most respectable looking guy anyway, or
Right.
who would want to send Easy Papella to the Attorney General's office? I mean, you were in trouble before you ever got to the front door. But, so I spent a whole year, I think,
We went down to watch some of the
you
trial.
were there.
I was at USF, that was probably
Well, yeah.
junior, senior year. of
Yeah,
USF.
because-
So what year is this, and that's the
So-
year you started the manor, when you got off that
80,
lawsuit?
I graduated in 88, so this
Well,
was all
yeah, now
happening
that-
in the late 80, like 87, 88
Yeah.
probably.
That business, we ended up selling that business, the solar thing, and the satellites. But then, what happened? How did I?
Oh, you ran it out of the house for a while, and you ended up selling it to Photocom.
Right, that's it, because we went bankrupt.
You went bankrupt, yeah, so you were working through to see the bankruptcy through, like all the way
Right,
to the end, to
right.
liquidate, whatever you could liquidate.
Yeah, you were the
pay
last
off.
man standing.
Yeah,
I was.
And then what?
But we brought it out of bankruptcy, and we did a merger with a company called Photocom, which was involved in the photoelectric power generation. Boy, what an experience,
You were way before your time.
way before our
All those
time.
businesses.
Yeah,
but then after that happened, I was graduating and Tim was starting at
and we were
Gonzaga.
making enough money to pay your tuition,
I know.
other than the scholarship that you won.
Yeah, so, once you went to school, that's when, and you had already finished the bankruptcy, right? That's when you guys had to figure out, do we do something with this big property or do we sell it?
Yeah.
Oh,
I
yeah,
mean, because
that's when we went into the bed and
the
breakfast
kids are gone,
business.
yeah,
Yeah, I got the dear son. We rented out your room.
right. All
Everything
your
you own is in a
belongings.
shoebox in the garage.
That's when Tim took that year off
Oh, in
after
between.
after
That was fortunate.
Brophy.
That's right.
It was fortunate, and Tim was off in Lisbon, Portugal, and that's what Mary Ellen and I were going to go to visit him, but we moved him out, and I guess was that when Phil and the girls moved in, or
They moved out too.
No, they were probably.
yeah, no,
gone.
that's when we converted your room into a bed, part of the bed and breakfast.
You all went to Scotland on a trip or something like that and stayed in bed and breakfast and said,
That's
hey,
right.
why don't we just make the house?
That's what we did, yeah. I don't know where we got the money for that. Oh, we made money off of the stock deal.
Yeah, that sale.
Yeah, the sale of the, how we did that, I don't know. But yeah, we were able to get out of that deal. And, but then we didn't have any money to pay for Tim's education.
No?
It's still
So
paying.
Yeah, yeah, he was still paying. So we had to end up borrowing.
I did, yeah. Signed the loans.
Right.
paid for
And
it.
the bed and
Stacy,
breakfast
Stacy
took
borrowed right at the end for
Last semester I had
$2,000 or something.
$2,500.
You had to pay your
My last semester.
credit
So,
card.
Yeah.
Not bad.
took me years to pay $2,500 off.
And you ran the bed and breakfast there
From-
for 10 or 12 years,
10
wasn't
years.
it?
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I
Right
was
up at the-
telling-
89 to, yeah.
Right
I was
up
telling Tim the other day that I didn't realize how hard it must have been to sell that property.
Oh,
Because, you know,
Well-
now we're thinking maybe switching out, like I love this home, but it's like, oh my gosh, I can't even imagine how hard it
but
must
I
have
think
been.
when that happened though, I think it was mom and dad were in such turmoil with her health and her losing her leg that it just was like, we have to get out. And I remember
It was
when
too
Louis and I
big.
moved back here when we
The
moved
business
from
was getting
Albuquerque
too busy.
back here, and I said I need to be there to help dad
You
because
had to
there's
help.
mom,
Thank God
can't,
you were
mom
there.
can't do it anymore, and I put
Right.
Emerson on my back in a backpack and helped
And you
do
were
it.
in the hospital.
Right, and
business
so
too.
I remember when Dad and I were kind of doing it, and Mom was, pretty much laid
Well,
up.
you were in Albuquerque, don't?
We had been in Albuquerque for a year
Because your mom went to Albuquerque,
when
I guess.
when I was giving birth to Anderson.
Anderson, yeah.
Mhm. She went and helped with Kelley.
And she went to help with Kelley,
Mhm.
and she came back, and I
Uh-huh.
remember picking her up at the airport. She could not walk.
Right, and
had
she
a-
never told me she was in pain during that.
So this is the history of Paul, Mary Ellen Kelley. You can see the fence going back to the back where they're leaving behind his past life as a priest, joining together. It's kind of a fictional scenario that Andre Blanchet, who was the painter, he created on commission from them. Andre had worked for my father as a salesman, selling water conditioners door to door. In fact, this little suitcase there is what their water testing kit was like when they would go door to door. This is Paul Kelley here. This is my mother, Mary Ellen Kelley, and that was sort of me in the wagon there, and all the kids. The church in the background, the oxen walking in stride, and entering the waters coming out to the west, and our little dog Muffin.
How long did you live in the
Spring of
house?
2000.
That's it.